Welcome back, Trinidad and Tobago, and welcome back to the Morning Brew. I am Akash Samaru, filling in for Hema Ramki soon. It's actually a really, really nice couch, if you're wondering. I always wondered how Hema sat in this. It's really comfortable, much more comfortable than it appears. But on set, we have Mr. Keita Demming and Mr. Jeremy Dickstein, and they're both here to talk about the agent of change, big ideas, and I'm not going to call it a summer camp. Because first of all, we don't have summer here, so I'll call it we have a wet season camp. I wouldn't call it that. Tell me exactly what this is.
So it's a space for young people to begin to learn how to problem solve. So, for example, before you had the EMA on and you had speakers talking about sort of some of the problems that we're having in society today. So this camp is about helping people think through these things on a systemic level. So we use a lot of our frameworks are from concepts like systems thinking, concepts like design thinking, and integrated thinking. So you give young people some real problem-solving skills and tools.
Mr. Dickstein, I understand that you're an educator for the Toronto District School Board.
Yeah, that's correct.
So you've done things like this before. So so tell me. Of course, we're not going to undervalue the importance of this. How important is this for young people to develop and to be given these tools at an early age, teen, preteen, that kind of age group there?
Absolutely. I mean, as a teacher, you understand how much the way in which people are sort of brought up is really what creates their mental habits and their outlook on the world in general. And so getting people the skills to sort of actively engage in the issues that they have in their society or their world or their personal lives in sort of a way that is productive and in a way that is sort of critical is really important. I've worked with people who are sort of within sort of their adult life. I've worked with people who are sort of at a university age, and I've worked with people who are sort of in elementary or secondary school. And it becomes much more difficult to change someone's mindsets the older they get. Young people tend to be much more open to new ideas and open to different ways of thinking. Because we become very efficient, the older we get, we kind of figure out ways in which we think about things. And we all have habits. And those are really good because they make us efficient, but they also at times tend to sort of close us off to certain possibilities and open-mindedness that younger people
From
don't.
your experience and working with youth here, what is the biggest hindrance to critical thinking and rational thinking for young people? What is that big hurdle that young people just seem to can't get over?
I wouldn't even say it's something that's a Trinidad and Tobago problem. Coming from Canada, you see it sort of everywhere. And the biggest part is actually that what we tend to ask them for is very specific answers. And what sort of as a society we want to know, give me two options so I can choose one. We want the simple answer. We don't want the complicated answer. And the biggest problems that we have are not simple answers. Dealing with things like government, dealing with things like the environment. These are not sort of simple solutions where there's the right answer and the wrong answer. There's many different people who are involved in the issue, and there's many different positives and many different negatives from any side. And so they've never waded into that kind of a complexity and that sort of messiness before. And so really telling them to sort of embrace that complexity is a really difficult thing when you've been asked for 12 years of school, what is the right answer? And so getting over that hurdle of really making them feel comfortable with potentially being wrong, with the fact that there are numerous right answers and figuring out what's the best for you at this moment, those tend to be the biggest.
It's getting them to actually to make a decision whether it's right or wrong, but to think about something and have an opinion on it. And I agree with that. A lot of young people are brought up thinking that something like the government and the environment, it doesn't really affect me as a young person, but it's really good that you would get these young people to understand that every decision made from above trickles down to even the toddlers. Mr. Demming, how are we going to make this an interactive session? Because look at the age group we're dealing with here. So we have to keep their minds stimulated. What kind of activities would you all have on this?
Yeah, so we do a whole series of activities. So a lot of them we call it a play-based sort of model or activity model. So we often give the participants a challenge that gets them to understand the concept, and then we debrief it and have a conversation after that. They're usually very engaging sorts of games that we play, but they're very geared towards teaching a concept like what is a mental model, or a concept like what does it mean to be a system, or how do you find leverage? And then we break that down and unpack that with them as a group, and we kind of use an approach where they are semi-leading the way, we are creating a framework to say, hey, this is how you discover certain concepts and principles.
Give me one specific example of an activities and what they learned from it.
So one specific example, the example I like to use often is, actually I'm not going to use that. There's a game that we play called Harvest. So Harvest is set up so that you are fishing in a particular pond, and eventually there are 5 teams, let's say there are 3 or 4 teams. The best strategy would be for everybody to fish 2 teams, catch 2 fish every year, and a year is like a round, and eventually everybody would catch like 40 or 50 fish at the end of the game. But what happens is that because people are thinking for themselves and they're not thinking about a larger system, then they fall into that tragedy of the commons trap, where they fish and they get 20 fish for them, but the entire pond dies. And then we usually have a very lively, rich discussion about what happens when you do something that benefits you, but is really bad for the commons or really bad for the good. And there's so many lessons that could come out of that. How does structure influence activities or events? How do you think about mental models, your way of thinking? How do you cooperate and collaborate? How do you negotiate with somebody and convince them to do something that's better for the common good than better for themselves, and then they have those debates in the game. So in order for them to successfully complete that game, they have to negotiate with each other on an agreement, and it's kind of like a mini version of a treaty agreement, which is really difficult to have. So that's an example of one game, and that's probably the longest, most complicated game we've played. And then there's simple games like thumb wrestling, where
I would do very well at that. I am undefeated at thumb wrestling.
And
I challenge anybody to wait outside.
Okay, so during the break,
thumb wrestler, just
during the break, we'll do it with you, and I guarantee you're going to fall for the same traps that the kids fall for, just because of that framing. Because there's a twist in it, right?
I'm intrigued. I always thought thumb wrestling was just as straightforward as you could get. Mr. Dickstein, you said you worked with adults and children. Mm-hmm. What's the big difference here with how adults would react to that situation as opposed to children?
Children are much more willing to admit when they're wrong, because we tell them they're wrong all the time. So the second they fall into the trap and you say, like, that seemed like you fell for that, they say, oh, I totally fell for that right off the bat. And adults say, well, this isn't very realistic. I would have done, and they automatically come up with reasons why the game is wrong. But that's sort of the point, is to really try to get them to stop thinking they automatically understand how things work, and to try to critically take a step back and like Keita said, find the leverage in places where other people assume there is none. Because that's, I mean, whether you're in finance, whether you're in education, whether you're in the environment, studies, wherever you are, finding that leverage is what's going to make the difference.
Okay, just to wrap it up now, tell me how I can get there and what's the cost attached?
So the camp is actually free. We ask people to give a donation. We've done, I think we sort of recruited through word of mouth. We came on the show last week, that kind of thing. And it's ongoing right now. And I think one of the most exciting things for me this year has been the partnership with Habitat for Humanity and getting the campers to work on a real life problem. So they're trying to solve a particular problem around youth engagement for Habitat for Humanity, and I think that's really exciting that it moves from neck up, and now we're getting hands dirty and it actually trying to solve a problem. Whereas before I did feel it was more like neck up rather than, now you're sort of getting that whole picture.
And how can the public get in contact with you all for registration and whatnot?
So everything's on our website, villageseedsolutions.com.
Villageseedsolutions.com.
Yeah, and with an S. So villageseedsolutions.com, or if you go on YouTube and Google Agents of Change Trinidad and Tobago, you're likely to find it.
I saw you on Facebook as well, huh?
Yeah, and we're on Facebook, actually. Right. Yeah, good point. We're on Facebook. But that group is specifically for participants. So the group is closed group. So graduates from the program can stay connected there. So we are on Facebook, but we're on Facebook for specifically people who've graduated from the program.
Okay, thank you very much, gentlemen. Before we go to break, as you know, the finals of the CPL will take place on Saturday, August 16th in St. Kitts. And to this end, Digicel Trinidad and Tobago Limited, its presenting partner of the games, will be giving away tickets, 3 tickets, to lucky persons who want to watch the action live at the Digicel IMAX, a very, very big screen. I could only imagine how great it would look when Trinidad and Tobago Red Steel wins. And Will Digicel has allocated the tickets to be won by the viewers of the morning edition. No, this show. This show, exactly. This is the show where you will get those tickets.